I want to spend the next 10 minutes or so talking about how sick Windrunner Spire is. This is a new dungeon coming in midnight, and it's going to be one of the 8 Mythic Plus dungeons in the pool. So this is a dungeon you're going to get quite familiar with over the testing of beta, going into the expansion, and of course during Season 1. This dungeon is a 4-boss dungeon, and while it is fairly linear, you have options to go to, the first or the second boss first. You can do some backtracking. Overall, pretty cool dungeon though. So it's going to start off with you entering the spire, taking on this first trash room. There's 3 different types of mobs in here. There's some casters, the Restless stewards. There's also the groundskeepers who just basically melee the tank and apply a tank buster / like armor reduction. And then you have these spell guards. The spell guards are kind of the worst of the bunch. They do a giant AoE to your group through their arcane salvo, and then they channel a 99% DR, like AoE effect, which can get kind of annoying. Now, what's interesting about that effect is that it gets canceled if all of the mobs are dead, but if they're not dead, then you have to move all of the mobs outside of the circle, or they're taking 99% reduced damage. I would understand if it was like a 60%, 50%, 75% damage reduction, but having it 99 is kind of criminal. Luckily, there's only 1 or 2 casters in each of these pulls, so not a big deal. Now, once you defeat the right side pack, you're able to actually head to the first boss. But if you're interested, you can actually just go to the left side and unlock the second boss area as well. So if you're someone who has, if your group has specific lust timings they want to do, you have an option there. The trash on either side of the dungeon is going to be different, so do keep that in mind. The first half of the dungeon and going to the first boss has a lot of these groundskeeper mobs, but as we progress later into the dungeon, you're going to see different sorts of mobs kind of in each section of the dungeon, which is interesting. So just to keep it similar to the dungeon journal, going to the canon boss order, we're going to go to Emberdawn first, which means we're going to go to the north side, the right side of the dungeon. Heading down, you're going to find the same mobs we just dealt with, 4 groundskeepers, a steward, and a spell guard. You're going to handle these in a similar fashion. Tanks, do be careful though, the tank buster adds up, or tank debuff stacks up pretty quickly. Now it is a short debuff, so simply kiting it out for 3 seconds, leg sweeping it to keep the mobs locked down. As you can see, the debuff only lasts for 2 seconds. It just applies pretty quickly. Once that pack is defeated, we're going to be heading down into the actual spire area, down to the first boss room. These mobs are going to be different. You are going to see groundskeepers still and the stewards, but you're also going to see them fighting back these pigeon men. These guys cast flame spit on the tank, and they have they'll randomly gain a healing absorb, or a damage absorb that also gives them 30% haste. So these mobs you're probably going to want to avoid pulling. I forgot the name of them, if I'm being honest, but we're going to call them pigeons. Dragonhawks, there we go. That's a word I should have known. That's okay. These guys are pretty annoying though, mostly because their absorb, especially if it scales with key level in the future, their absorb, it's 30% of their max health. So they live a very long time. Obviously, if you have good burst damage, it's fine. It's great. I don't know if it's purgeable. It doesn't look like it. Generally, the followers in these dungeon tests are pretty good about spell stealing, purging, or soothing mobs. In this case, it wasn't. Now, these spiders are going to be kind of the bane, I think, of a lot of people's existence. The small guys just die and they leave pool on the ground. That's fine. These spindle webs, the creeping spindle webs, do this poison barrage that's not interruptible, but it can be stunned. When it goes off, it applies a poison to your full group, which means that poison dispels, poison cleansing totem, obviously classes that can dispel poisons are going to be highly valued in here. I don't know what the damage on the tuning is going to end up looking like by the time we do Mythic Plus testing in here. I can imagine in a room like this, where there's 2 of them, it could get pretty spooky. So in this pull, there's 2, and then there's also some of these stewards, which are casting these spirit bolts. Actually, there's just 1, which is something that you're going to notice in a lot of these dungeon playthroughs that I'm kind of walking through on Alpha. A lot of these pulls will only have 1 or 2 casters max. It's kind of Blizzard living up to what they're stating that their intended design goal is for dungeons, and especially their rework to kicks, both increasing the lockout and removing them from healers, fixing diminishing returns on certain abilities like any kind of stun. I think Blizzard's trying to move away from the meta where you have to have 35 coordinated CCs and stops and a perfect dungeon composition to get through some of these dungeons on a higher difficulty, which is nice to see. So these hunters put down a trap in this room, which I shouldn't just to test here. It stuns you for 5 seconds, so don't get stunned. And then the Lynx just like jumps on the tank. I don't know if he jumps on players. Sometimes these things, the way they're coded, is they jump on player characters, but my group members are coded as NPCs, so some things don't affect them. But this Ferocious Pounce, you're just going to want to move away from the tank. I'm surprised it's not a bigger circle. Now, I don't think Blizzard should make it bigger, but I'm surprised it's not one of those things where like the tank needs to run out and not on top of other players. Now, these plants out here, if you walk over them, they'll spawn. So you want to be careful not to walk over them unless you want them for like funnel or something like that. Now, if there's a groundskeeper near them, the groundskeeper will like spawn them out of the ground regardless if you walk over them or not. And then you have like this mini boss, this bloated lasher. This guy just does a AoE dot to the group that lasts for 10 seconds, and he spams bolts. I don't know if it's at the tank specifically. Like I said before, the way it's coded, it could be coded to only target players. And since I'm playing with 4 NPCs, it's not targeting them, but it's not a big deal. You're just going to kick this one mob and it's going to be chill. Now, this is one of those kind of mobs where you'll probably end up dragging it around to other of the like the little plants or other groundskeepers. In this case, I didn't want to because I just didn't care. And also, we don't know what percent's going to look like in here. There might be a world where you have to. There might be a world where you're really trying to avoid it. And then moving down a little bit further, we have these smaller invasive lashers that just cast the fungal bolt like we just saw on that other bloated lasher. And then we have 2 more Dragonhawks, the pigeons. They're going to do the same thing as before. They're going to put a debuff on players that does fire damage. And then they're going to gain an absorb shield that makes them have 30% more haste, which I don't know if it's like, if it updates dynamically where then the dots will tick faster, or if it's just like a melee attack increase. And then this should be the last pull before heading down to Emberdawn, the first technical canon boss of this dungeon. My one small complaint about this dungeon in particular is there's a little bit of roleplay throughout the entire dungeon. And that's like, it's every time you get to a boss room, you have to wait for a little bit of time. And you could probably counter it by getting into the room faster or having your healer run ahead or a DPS run ahead or someone. But you'll notice that there's some points where just the boss takes forever to spawn. Anyways, this boss on normal is pretty chill. Little tank buster through his little beak attack. Then he does this burning gale, which is just a small pushback that does, it doesn't do any damage from what it looks like, at least on normal. But you do want to dodge these tornadoes that are spinning around the room. And then outside of that, like that's it. The fight's pretty dull. It gets a little bit more hectic, obviously, when the boss lives longer and has a mythic mechanic. And then a random player gets targeted with that like circle around them. And when it expires, I believe it leaves a pool on the ground. A pretty chill first boss. I'd imagine there's a world, especially if like funnel exists in the game, where you'll have someone like start the boss RP early, and then you'll pull a bunch of those small little like lasher mobs down onto it, or groundskeepers and stuff, and just do like insane burst damage off the rip. Anyways, the portal takes you back. Once again, one of those small RP things that it's just, when you're up against a timer, those things become way more noticeable. When you're playing it like this in a normal dungeon and you're just getting to experience for the first time and you can take it as fast or as slow as you want, I don't mind it. But when it's like, well, you're up against a 32-minute timer and you're spending 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there, 5 seconds here, that stuff adds up over the course of a key. So yeah, anyways, this pull going down to the right-hand side now, or I guess left-hand side when you're coming into the dungeon. Same pull as before. It's a spell guard, it's a caster from the steward, and then it's just groundskeepers. When we get down into the next area is when we're going to see totally different mobs. So I'm going to go pretty big in this room. It's going to be hard to see, but there's these kind of like white ghosty spectral mobs. They're soldiers. And what they're going to do is they're going to apply a thing called Precise Cut to the tank. It is dodgeable, which I noticed. But it makes you take 15% less healing, so it's a small mortal wound. I think 15% is fine. It's when you have those egregious like 50% healing reductions that those mobs really, really suck. Now it's these cutthroats that are really scary. They do a thing similar to like motherload mobs where they try to apply a poison to their weapon. If they successfully apply the poison, their attacks, well, they apply poison, and that can be pretty problematic in higher keys. In theory. So those are like the main things you want to lock down. The Reavers, I can't really tell what they do. I think they just do damage to the tank. And yeah, that's it. So the cutthroats are really what you want to look out for in these pulls. Now this next pull, we have this like Devoted Woebringer, this like Banshee lady. She is your standard channel big damage event with an absorb shield, and you need to break the absorb to break. So it's this pulsing shriek. The absorb, I believe, is about 30% of her max health. And once you can't kick the pulsing shriek until you kick it. Now it doesn't ramp up in damage. It just prevents her from being kicked. So is it important to break through the shield to kick it? I don't think so. If it did ramping damage, yes, but it doesn't, at least in this difficulty in alpha. So we're not going to worry about it. So now this room is going to look kind of the same outside of the fact that decorations are different, but we've seen a room layout like this already. I like that this dungeon is kind of split into like two halves that are like reflected. It's kind of interesting. This big flesh behemoth just does a frontal, nothing too crazy. And then fetid spew applies like this poop on the ground. So you just want to move him out of it. And so right here, poison blades just went off. So you're going to see now that I'm going to be gaining a poison with every successful melee attack on me. Now the bigger problem is that he does a thing called shadow dive, which will have him like leap or shadow step behind a player and like melee them. And if they have the poison effect, they'll also apply that poison to that player. And if the poison ends up being terribly scaled and does a lot of damage, it can be problematic for just random party members. The tank, you can probably take some poisons. It's all good. So this room, a couple of banshees, a couple of reavers, and a cutthroat. So we're going to pull these guys together and just blow them up, trying to kick the poison blades. Now, we don't know what percent's going to look like. This is definitely a room where you can pull the full room if you needed it. I don't think there's anything that's really that dangerous in here, and there's not a lot of casters outside of this devoted Woebringer. So most of the mobs in here you could probably pull a little bit more aggressively, but I'm going to assume that there's going to be way more percent in here than you actually need. So you're going to have to find either creative ways to skip things or, well, that's pretty much it. Or be very precise with your movement and pull pretty small. But up to this point, as you've probably noticed, we've been able to get some pretty sizable pulls, 6+, 10+ targets. It's not unrealistic. All right, moving into the second boss. This is the Derelict duo. So it's Callus and this big guy. His name is like, I'm just waiting for my waiting to target. Latch. There we go. So this is your standard 2-target cleave fight. The mobs or the bosses obviously have interacting mechanics. So the Callus lady, the Banshee, she casts the bolts. Latch does Bone Hack, which is a tank buster, so you want to kick, and then use defensives on Latch's, Bone Claw. You've obviously already seen me put the pool down. He does this like splattering spew. And then Callus will like port away to a random area of the boss encounter space and start like casting what I'd imagine is eventually going to be like a one-shot event. Now, I think it does ramping damage over time. You just want to interrupt her with the claw that I think targets tanks. Again, this could be one of those things where it won't target NPCs. And since I'm playing with 4 NPCs, it might not be targeting them, but the tank will have to interrupt it. If not, whoever gets targeted with that hook will have to run behind the boss. Now on Mythic, actually I didn't look this up, but I'd imagine that the room's going to fill up much quicker. Maybe that spew's going to target more than one player. And then here's the reason why you need to kill him at the same time. This guy gets really, really, really big. And every couple seconds, like every 5 seconds, he gains a 50% damage increase. So right now he's doing 200% more damage to me. And then this heavy yank is going to end up stunning me. And so obviously if you don't kill it in time, yeah, you're dead. And luckily my strong, able group of followers, my NPCs were able to defeat him before I died. So that's good. Once again, here's like that weird bit of like RP that we have to wait for. And so we have to wait for this guy to open up the portal and then we can click. Now it's going to take us just up here. So I'm wondering if there's a world where you can like run back quick enough where it won't matter. But this is the kind of RP that's annoying. Is like waiting for these gates to fall, waiting for bosses to spawn, waiting for bosses once they die to have him open the portal so you can run back. Anyways, in this area, there's a lot of archers, but most of the other mobs don't feel like they do that much. So what I tried to do here is I tried to run all the way down to the end in line of sight, but unfortunately the archer is just like staying back there, casting a volley. And then I think my followers end up actually killing that single archer that's out there. So bad attempt on my part to do this, but also followers don't interact all that well with the tank's like positioning. So now these phalanx breakers, they do some charges like this. So just make sure you're dodging it. The soldiers are applying that healing reduction to the tank, so be aware of that. And then the archers are just shooting and doing volleys, your standard archers. So this dungeon is like pretty tame. And then, interrupting Screech, just obviously don't be casting. This is something that we've seen in, I feel like every season has some type of mob that does that. Anyways, once you finish up that pull, you get some glorious sights of the Misty Cove or Misty Shoreline. And then you are going to be facing off against the Haunting Marauders, the Old Horde. And you have some Marauders who are going to just do some melee stuff on the tank, as well as like a whirlwind effect. You have these axe throwers, which are basically archers, so they're pretty difficult to move. And then you have the kind of like hounds. There's some dire wolves. I don't know what the dire wolves do. They always die too fast. They apply like a debuff to players. I don't know what it does, if I'm being honest. Pretty chill. Basically, the idea is you want to pull the Marauders and the Wolves onto the Axe Throwers, and you can get them grouped pretty nicely. Nothing to really kick. The Whirlwind effects from the Marauders can be stopped just with any type of CC. So you can get pretty creative with the way you stop, but honestly, just like things like Leg Sweep, really good. So here we go, a bunch of Marauders and Wolf onto the Axe Thrower, and we're chilling. I could pull in that Mystic, that Ogre guy that's sitting there, but he is a caster. They have a lot of health, so you probably want to get them pulled a little bit earlier. But yeah, these mobs are these mobs are like super chill, which I think is what WoW needs with their design direction. I think you need a lot of mobs that are just like what I generally call fodder, where they don't do much. They maybe have one mechanic that affects like a tank or an AoE, or it can be countered with like any type of CC. I think it's so good. This is now the final boss room. This is not the boss, though. This is just one pack you have to kill beforehand. There's no skipping this, unfortunately. It's double Mystic. I don't know what Blizzard's whole, like, shtick is with, like, having two dangerous mobs right before a boss that you can't skip. They've been doing this since, like, the start of Dragonflight in Shadowmoon Burial Grounds, I feel like is where it started. It happened in, like, Floodgate, for example. It happened in Motherlode, for example. I don't know. It's like they really like doing this. These guys cast Chain Lightning, which is exactly what it is. It's Chain Lightning. They also, once they hit 50% health, cast Lust, which gives them 20% haste. It does affect every mob that's in the pool, so you kind of want to push them last, but you could also just have like AoE Soothes or multiple Soothes, or you just don't care about Soothe and it's fine. Anyways, here's the boss. Boss is super easy. He does Rampage, which is like the tank buster. Then he is going to do a big shout, this Rallying Bellow. It's going to do AoE damage to the group. Bang. Knocks everyone back. And then he gains Shield Wall, which gives him 99%. I wish like Prot Warriors had that, dude. 99% DR? So good. Anyways, as you could probably guess, killing all of the mobs is going to remove that DR from him. Hitting him right now is pointless, and all he does during this phase is he channels Bladestorm at a random player. So that player should just kite them away from the mobs, and everyone else should just focus on killing the grunts and the axe throwers that he spawns. Once that removes, it's rinse and repeat. Nothing crazy. This boss gave me similar vibes to the Dawn of the Infinite boss. Do you guys remember that one? It's like a very watered down version of that one. Can be a pretty hectic fight, but just try to drag Marauders over to the axe throwers. Pretty easy. Now, once the fight goes down, you're going to end up clicking on this conduit, and it's going to take you up all the way to the Spire, to the final boss room. So you kind of have two bosses that are back to back. And so essentially, when we do end up doing this on Mythic Plus, you want 100% count getting to the third boss, because then you're going boss. Pretty simple. Now, again, here's more RP. You have to wait for them to kind of spawn this, and then you are ready to take on the Restless Heart. This boss gives me similar vibes to the dragon from Vortex Pinnacle. So she's going to do this little barrage of arrows that are going to land on the ground. Then this boss is going to do Gust Strike on the tank, knocking them back. And yeah, that's kind of it. At least on normal, that's it. This bolt barrage is going to just slam on the tank, so you're going to face it at a wall. I tried taking the arrow there thinking that might dodge it, but it doesn't. And then, last but not least, she's going to teleport to the one side of the room, cast Bullseye Wind Blast. Now, you can keep damaging her during this phase, but when this thing spawns, it's going to unleash this wave that you're going to use the arrows to jump over. Obviously, you can also use things like Shadow Step, Transcendence. I don't know if like Heroic Leap and stuff work, but Blink, I'm sure, is fine. But yeah, that's the fight. And then it's rinse and repeat. Arrows come down, knockback happens, the barrage on the tank, and then you're chilling. And that's it. That is Windrunner Spire. This dungeon is probably going to be... This is really early. I shouldn't even be saying this, but I think it's going to be one of my favorites. The mob design is so simple, and I love it. Like, you can put... Like, you have like 10, 12 different mobs in here, but their mechanics are simple. They're placed strategically in a way where you can still pull big without being punished for having like, you're not going to have ever like 30 casters in a pull. While it is linear, you have choice. You can choose to pull big in one area and kind of try to sneak your way through another area. You can go left or right, kind of right off the get-go. My only gripe, my only complaint right now is that there's like a little too much RP throughout the entire dungeon. You have to, clear the first boss room or the first trash room to get either side open. And then when you get to the first boss, you have to wait for Emberdawn to spawn. Again, that's probably countered just by walking into the room a little bit earlier or walking trash down there earlier. Waiting for him, Lyrith or whatever his name is, to do his little voice lines afterwards. Kind of annoying. Spawning the portals to get back quickly. Faster than running back, but it's still obnoxious. It should be right when the boss goes down. So if Blizzard can add those in Mythic Plus specifically, this dungeon's going to be an absolute banger. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this little breakdown, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.